Throw Miami's economy.
It's my engine. That's great.
That's a real camera?
Real one.
Yeah, I did.
My favorite conversation.
Some of the meetings.
What he did last year.
Yeah, luckily.
Young.
He's very much let's get it done kind of guy.
Personally.
Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon, everybody. Okay, yeah, we just turned it on.
I'll give you a couple of ideas for companies.
And there's an echo going on outside and through the building. That was probably one of the most the most forceful call to orders I've ever seen in my life. So thank you for taking your seats. We'll start. This is the 2018 eGov Summit Luncheon, and we're thrilled to have you here today. We're looking forward to a dynamic conversation between United States Congressman Carlos Curbelo, United States Congressman Brian Mast, and United States Congressman Ryan Costello, moderated by CNBC's John Harwood. Before we get started, we'd like to acknowledge and thank our incredible eGov Luncheon sponsors, SAP and FPL. Without further ado, please help me welcome one of the most beautiful people at FPL, Irene White.
Spiro, nobody can give a better introduction than Spiro Canton. So everyone, I am Irene White. I'm the Senior Director of External Affairs here in Miami-Dade County, and I'm very, very happy to be here with all of you today. You know, we started off as sponsors of this great eMERGE. I guess it's been how many years now? 4, 5?
5.
We started from the beginning, and it's really gotten better and better every single year, and we're happy to be here. At FPL, we understand the importance of innovation. We understand the importance of disruptive technologies. Either you're with it or you're really getting left behind. And that's really something that is core to our business and how we treat the advancements in the grid. When I walked around today and I saw all of that innovation, I saw all of the energy. When you look at the exhibits, you look at the booths, you see all this energy that really makes a lot of sense here in Miami. There's not a more vibrant town than Miami. It really clicks with what we do as a company. You know, at Florida Power and Light, our best story that we have of innovation, really the most current one, is what we've done with the grid. And we call it a smart grid, because on top of our electrical system, we have built a technology system. And it's really been perfected over the years by a lot of the things that we've been doing directly with the customers that we serve. For instance, the smart grid of today allows you to save money on your electric bill. It gives you access to your consumption on a daily basis. It's greatly helped our reliability. As a matter of fact, the work that we have done on the grid has enabled us to have the best, number one, best performance and reliability in 2017 so far of all the years that we've been serving the territory. So we're very, very proud of that, and we continue to do more. As a matter of fact, during Irma, one of the things that we did was we started to fly drones and get patrols. Right before even we were able to get out there, we had drones that were patrolling major lines to be able to assess the damage that was on there, be able to deploy resources that much quicker to those impacted areas. So with that, I am more than happy to turn this over to this great speakers that we'll be having. Please enjoy this great luncheon. It looks like it's going to be tremendous, and continue to enjoy the summit here in Miami-Dade County, beautiful Miami Beach. Thank you all for coming. Thank you.
All right, Irene White from FPL, she's electrifying, isn't she? I was thinking that, you know, the technology has really disrupted the English language. Yeah, disruptive used to be a bad thing, now it's a good thing, right? Drones, what do you think about drones? Drones are great now, aren't they? They're very productive. And dark fiber is a good thing also for commerce. So we have so many things to think about when technology comes along, including how we apply those terms. But without further ado, here is our next sponsor, SAP's Latin American and Caribbean President, Claudio Morzabal. Claudio?
Thank you, Spiro. And I'm sure I won't be able to be as electrifying as Irene or as eloquent as Spiro. But I want to also welcome all of you to this wonderful event, and also recognize a friend of all of us, Manny Medina and his team, for what has been achieved after 5 years. It's very clear in my mind the first eMERGE event where there were a few hundred people here, and I think I would not be wrong if I say that we have more than 15,000 people in attendance this week. So congratulations for your achievements, and no better place to do this than the Gateway of the Americas. Talking about technology could take us the remaining of the week, and I'm sure you want to focus on your lunch and obviously listen to the wonderful speakers that are aligned for this luncheon. Let me just say that technology gives us a unique opportunity to level the playing field. Be it the private sector or the public sector, it will create opportunities that were not available before. And especially now that emerging technologies have come to change not only the way that we run our organizations, but more so in our lives. And we as leaders in the business and leaders in public sector have a task ahead of us, because just think of this. In the smartphone that we have in our pocket, there is more emerging technologies together than probably what many of the Fortune 500 companies have been able to implement in the last few years. So the task at hand is not so much which technology to choose, but how do we implement it in an effective way to change the life of our fellow citizens. We at SAP believe that the best thing that we can do, taking advantage of emerging technologies and what we have to live in the last few years as a result of the digital transformation, is the fact that we have to make a significant positive impact in society by utilizing technology. And that's what we mean by purpose. So purpose is very simple. We're here to help businesses run better, to improve people's life, and by doing that, leave a positive impact in society. That's why the best companies, the best businesses run SAP. Thank you. Enjoy your luncheon.
Thank you again to FPL and SAP for making this luncheon possible. I now have the distinguished pleasure of welcoming CNBC's John Harwood, United States Congressman Carlos Curbelo, United States Congressman Brian Mast, and United States Congressman Ryan Costello to the stage.
These babies on? You got it? Okay. Thanks for being with us. And we're very lucky today because everyone knows that the country is angry and upset with Washington. And we're fortunate to have three of the people who are responsible for that because they're members of Congress. And it's well known that Congress is to blame for most of the problems the country has, and I just want to start out by giving each of them a chance to say a few words in their defense.
Look, I'd say the most important thing that we have to do is recognize we can't sit down at our Thanksgiving table and agree with all the people that we sit down with. But if we give everybody next to us a certain level of respect, treat them as though their opinion does actually matter, then we're going to be able to sit down again and again and again. So I think that's the important part. We're not going to all agree in Washington, but we have to be able to treat each other as though each other's opinions absolutely matter so we can sit down again. That's my take on it.
Thank you, John, and I'll second that, and just thank everyone here, Manny Medina, and everyone who's responsible for organizing eMERGE for this opportunity to have this conversation. You hear a lot of talk about consumer empowerment in the context of technology, and I think one of the great things that we could probably do in our democracy to help heal it, because as Brian says, there's just a lot of anger and frustration out in our country, is empower people with information, with real information, and make them feel like they actually have a say in their society, in their government, whether that be local, state, or federal. And for technology to be that great disruptor that it can be, a force for good, I'm really happy to have the opportunity to be with my colleagues and so many other brothers and sisters in public office that are here in this room today. So thank you.
You may wonder, why is a congressman from Pennsylvania down here? A couple things real quick. Brian and Carlos are two of my closest friends in Congress. The three of us collectively have three of the most independent voting records in Congress. Brian and Carlos look at the issue, not the party, and I think that that's what we all want to see in Congress. I serve on the Energy and Commerce Committee that has jurisdiction over digital commerce, consumer protection, as well as telecom issues. So this discussion we're going to have today is very relevant to the work that I do on my congressional committee. And then finally, SAP's North American headquarters is 2 minutes from the perimeter of my district. So hundreds of SAP employees are actually my constituents, and it's great to see them sponsoring the event here today. John, thanks for hosting this, and thanks for having me here. Nice weather down here.
He's not the first person from Pennsylvania to be down in Florida, I gotta tell you that. Let me start by ticking through a few issues that are before the Congress, or potentially before the Congress, because all of us, and those of us in the national media, may be preoccupied perhaps excessively on things that are said and done by the president, even though at the same time there's a lot of stuff percolating in Congress, whether or not it makes it over the finish line or not. So I wanted to start about one thing that's been in the news lately, and that is the issue of regulation of companies like Facebook. We've had Mark Zuckerberg testify before the Congress about the data privacy issues related to Cambridge Analytica and what came out in the campaign. And let me just start with you, Congressman Costello, and ask you what's going to happen with respect to regulation of social media platforms, and if nothing, why not? And would you agree that nothing is a good solution?
So the European Union is about to implement a new data regulatory framework that is extremely far-reaching and that has industry very concerned in terms of compliance costs. You're not going to see that happen in the United States of America, but you ultimately will see something, because I think everybody feels they have more digital privacy rights than they actually have, statutorily speaking. What I would ask everyone to think about is, no matter what the digital privacy framework we enact, Facebook is going to be able to comply, as are the big data, big social media companies. What I think we need to be concerned about in Congress is making sure that whatever regulatory framework we put out there, it doesn't stunt the growth or prevent the next startup company from being implemented. So we have issues like, do you have the right to erase your data from a company? Do you have the right to correct it? There's a lot of very sophisticated issues here. I think we ultimately will get somewhere, but I actually think that this will probably be more regulatory, and the Federal Trade Commission probably will play the first most outsized role, Congress may then fill in the gaps. That's my sense of what will happen in the coming years.
Do either of you support a Europe-type framework, or do you think this is something that Congress should stay out of altogether?
As much as possible, I think Congress should stay out as long as we can guarantee that soft touch regulation style or approach that we've had for the internet since its inception. And this is a policy area where I really think, and our colleagues on ENC are doing their best to find the perfect balance. Because if we would have had for the last 20 years an overly burdensome regulatory environment in the United States, we may not have the internet. Who knows, right? We may not all be gathered here today. So we want to find that perfect balance between encouraging more innovation and more development, and then also protecting people's privacy rights. So I don't think the best solution would be a European-style solution. I think we should do the best we can to keep the regulation as limited as possible.
What's the old saying? I'm from the government and I'm here to help, right? That's not always the best statement that you want to hear. I would caution anybody in expecting Congress to be a better scalpel than they are a broadsword. We cut things broadly. Looking at things in the most surgical way, in my experience, hasn't been the best way that we always go about things. But I think one of the bigger issues here, we can go out there and work on the regulation of what goes on with privacy and data. But one of the things that I saw come out of that conversation with Mark Zuckerberg is what they're going to do to be looking at truth. And that's one of the most difficult things that we absolutely don't want Congress to say, that they can regulate what is the truth that anybody can go out there and put into the social media sphere as their First Amendment right. And that's probably the two biggest things that I would caution anybody to look at out of Congress is, can we expect anybody to try to regulate truth, and can we expect Congress to be as surgical as what they would need to be in an issue like this? And that's the caution I give. Those aren't good answers, sorry.
Congressman, you've got a follow-up.
And we may see the EU framework be implemented and then draw lessons from that. What works, what doesn't work, how can a small business implement it at a reasonable cost but not an overly burdensome cost, and then move forward from there. There is some discussion that may be how it actually unfolds in the months to come.
Congressman Mast, I want to start with you on the issue of guns, which has been in the news since, well, for a long time, but most conspicuously since the Parkland shooting a while ago. And you made some news that time, becoming a Republican member, to call for much stricter regulation than your colleagues have supported. National polling shows, for example, that 60% of the American people want to ban assault weapons. From all I can tell, nothing is happening on that front in Congress beyond the Fix NICS bill, which was included in the spending. Do you agree? Is nothing going to happen? And if you were explaining to members of your family at the Thanksgiving dinner table, how would you explain why nothing will happen?
So number one, I'd say it's not that there's nothing happening. There's a great deal happening in Congress, but this is probably one of the biggest issues that anybody could expect something to happen on. We're talking about a right granted to us under the Bill of Rights, you know, and when you talk about this with people, it's like saying, well, maybe immediately after this we should, maybe talk about what should be done with due process, and maybe after that, should we have a conversation about what goes on with the First Amendment right? This is incredibly personal to everybody that's involved, and I make it the point to tell people there are some very big holes in this system, but we go out there and we acknowledge in the system, you have a Second Amendment right that wasn't given for the 13 colonies to defend themselves against deer. It was given to them to defend themselves against a tyrannical government, and that's a right that people take very personally. In that, we should look at all of these holes that exist in the system that say, how can we be a civilized society and not address these things? The fact that states aren't required to upload criminal data information into criminal background check systems, or that even less than that juvenile records are basically non-existent in background check system, or the fact that there's not a background check for all the sales that go on out there. You could have anybody move in across the street from you and sell them whatever firearm not knowing anything about their background, or the nexus between mass media, video games, movies, things like that, and what goes on with a violent society today. It's not that there's nothing going on in Congress, it's that this is probably the biggest thing next to anything else on the Bill of Rights that you could try to ask somebody to go out there and dissect. And in that, it's not going to happen quickly at all to work our way through this.
But you think we should ban assault weapons, correct?
I think number one, we should come up with a definition of that, and that's one of the most difficult things to come up with, because you're trying to say, is it the length of the barrel? Does it have a flash suppressor? Can you attach a suppressor or a silencer? Is it collapsing buttstock? Is it the sighting system on it? The rate of fire? What caliber it is? The color of it? The magazine capacity? How do you go out there and define that? It's not easy. So number one, you do that, and then number two, you say, look, you got to be this tall to ride the ride. I think that's the appropriate way to do it, and that's the way that we address it in legislation right now, something known as the National Firearms Act. It's been in place since about 1934. That's what's in place that says you couldn't saw off your shotgun in your garage under 18 inches. We look at the lethality of different weapons and we say, you got to be this tall to ride the ride. It's very, very fair for me to say, as somebody that's wielded this weapon in combat, M4 carbine, which is very similar to your AR-15, to say, look, I am much more lethal with that on any given day of the week than I am with a sawed-off shotgun or with a sawed-off rifle or with, some of these other things that are addressed there. We need to look at how tall you need to be to ride that ride, and I think that's the important part.
Let me just test the sentiment in the room to begin with. Raise your hand in this room if you think that assault weapons should be illegal to own in this country. Right.
What's the definition?
Understood. Brian can figure out the definition. But it looks like, I don't know, half the room, maybe a little more than half. Congressman Corbello, do you think that, realizing it's a difficult issue, that there will be no movement in this direction this year, next year, for the next several years? Or do you think 10 years from now, we are going to look back and say Parkland was the beginning of the process that led to them being outlawed?
I think the latter, and I think you're seeing it already. So after Parkland, a lot of Republicans signed on to universal background check legislation, which I'm a co-sponsor of. And other Republicans are, with our Democratic colleagues, introducing other reform measures. I think if we accept that the 50 states are the laboratories of democracy and figure out kind of what works best in our country, that what Florida did just a few months ago is going to end up being a strong model for gun safety reform for our country. There are a lot of common sense measures that have broad support among the population. Raising the age to 21 for all gun purchases, I think that's something that we could do at the federal level. I certainly support it. 72-hour waiting periods. We know that of all of the gun safety measures or reforms that can be enacted, that one would probably save the most lives, 72-hour waiting periods for gun purchases. So I do think that 5, 6, 8 years from now, we're going to look back and see that Florida and the reform agenda that was adopted here just a few weeks ago is going to end up becoming a model for the country, and I think that's good.
You agree?
Yeah, well, a couple things. One, I don't think that you could get an assault weapons ban passed through the U.S. Senate right now. I think that there are some red state Democratic senators that wouldn't even vote for it. I think.
Would you like to see it enacted?
I think, back to Brian's point, and he had a lot of courage in his editorial, is what is the definition? And I know everyone's hand, most hands went up for that. I can probably predict that almost every single hand in the room would go up if we said, if you purchase a gun on the internet, should you have to go through a background check? And that should be a federal law. So when we talk about universal background checks, to me, that's the first.
Who agrees with him on that? If you buy a gun on the internet, you should have a background check.
And so two things. One, whether it be Florida or the Texas church shooting, if the NICS background check system worked the way that it should do, all data uploaded, to Brian's point, they could have been preventable. So the background check system, and then making it more robust in terms of every gun purchase, I think that that's the first most implementable step that Congress could do, and that I think could happen in much quicker than anything else, because it's very common sense. People understand it. We don't have to get into definitions of what is or what isn't. I'd like to see that happen. I think that would be a good thing for the country. It'd be a good thing for the Republican Party too, in my opinion.
Let me ask you about another issue that we in the past have heard a lot of talk about. It was supposed to be the big bipartisan issue on the president's agenda, and that's infrastructure. The president came out with an infrastructure plan. We are now in April of 2018. So far as I can tell, there is zero forward movement on the president's infrastructure plan. Is that the way it's going to be? Is Congress not doing this year, and why is that?
Transportation Infrastructure Committee.
They're looking at the
Ways
guys.
and means, though. He's where the money is.
I think we're going to get to it, probably not in the way that many of us dream to, and you have to be, flat out about these things and be honest about it. I don't think we're going to get to it in the way that we dreamed of doing this, and that's unfortunate. I think we're all hopeful that we still can in 2018. I think you'll still see something that's labeled infrastructure. It's not going to be as big and broad and massive as what we'd hope that we could accomplish. That's unfortunate. You can Monday morning quarterback this and say, should we have started with that instead of healthcare reform? There's a lot of ways that you can look at this, but maybe some of us would say yes, some others would say no, but I don't think we're going to get to it in the way we dreamed up.
And why is that?
Democrats don't want to support a big infrastructure bill right now, which is why the speaker had said we're going to break this down into 5 or 6 different parts. So you will get infrastructure spending. It'll be in different bills. Some could be airports, some could be ports. So there's a lot of different ways to slice it up. So I think that's what we'll likely see in the coming months.
Congressman Curbelo, is there anything substantial that Congress will legislate this year?
My hope, and I shared this with the president on Thursday, spent some time with him traveling down to Key West in my district where he visited. And I told him the most important thing, in my view, that we can do from now for the rest of the year is to pass immigration reform. And that is an issue where the White House has shown a willingness to engage in a meaningful way. They put out a proposal that I wouldn't support all of its components, but certainly showed an effort to try to get into that healthy middle ground where we could have a compromise. That proposal would legalize about 1.8 million undocumented young immigrants.
You're talking about Dreamers.
That's right.
Isn't it clear that the president has dropped that issue?
No, that's not what he told me, but it's clear that the issue is very difficult, and that's why we've been debating this for 12 years since President George W. Bush first introduced the idea of reforming our immigration laws in a broad way. And what happens is, especially as we get close to an election, is that some Republicans try to cater to their bases and say no compromise, no amnesty, and some Democrats want to keep the issue alive politically and also don't want to reach
The United
a
States is
healthy
doing a
middle
pretty
ground.
good job of keeping it alive.
The president, his rhetoric is not helpful, and it's not only doing harm in terms of how a lot of immigrants in our country feel, but a lot of visitors. I've made some trips over the last few weeks, and some of our embassy personnel have told me that they're seeing fewer people looking to travel to the United States. So that's a problem, but the solution is to fix the immigration system
Okay,
and to
straight-
show that Republicans and Democrats can work together on it.
Straight talk here. What are the chances that we end 2018 with legal protection for the Dreamers?
I'd say today I put it somewhere around 50-50. And with that, I'd also tell you that we're as close as we've ever been to a solution. There's a lot of support on the Republican side. There's an effort right now to kind of bring the issue to the forefront where 50 Republicans have signed on. It's a little bit of an aggressive legislative tactic that we're using to show the Speaker of the House that we're growing impatient. And there are a lot of Democrats also showing some goodwill and working with us. So I think we have about a 50% chance, which for immigration is actually pretty good.
I'd say let's also remember that there are a lot of good ideas as it relates to immigration out there. One of the ones I think maybe we're all on is one known as the Enlist Act, and that's an act that says, okay, listen, you're a dreamer and you're here. If you want to go out there and serve your country honorably, serve an honorable term in the military, you're not dishonorably discharged or anything like that, that is your pathway. That is your way to make this right and become a contributing member of society, which we think you all want to become. Those folks want to become that are classified as dreamers. We think they want to be that, but that is the pathway to it that is palatable for many. So there's a lot of really creative and different ideas that exist out there that a lot of people have never heard of.
The next big push, John, is going to be the Farm Bill, crop insurance, reforming certain programs within the Ag Bill. But you go to a farmer in my district or many districts, you know what they're going to ask you about? Immigration and the Ag visas. And if you go to some of the high-tech or medical device companies, what are they going to talk about? The high-tech visas. And so separate and apart from
talk about tariffs too.
Well, that's true. We can talk about that. But besides DACA and Dreamers, which is a significant issue, if you want economic growth in this country, making sure that you have the right workers on a pathway to citizenship who come here, who get their education, who are working, it's the immigration system, the visa system is broken in our agricultural community. And every farmer in my district, landscaper in my district will say that, as will some of the high-tech jobs, which often leads to the kind of really robust growth that can really recharge a community economically.
Each of you, in different ways, has distanced himself from the president on one issue or the other. Very difficult election environment for Republicans this year. You've got a tough race. You're not running, although that's for other reasons, because of redistricting. I don't know how tough your race is going to be, but a lot of Republicans are facing tough races. So my question for you is, when you think about the long-term health of your own career, but also the Republican Party, is Donald Trump a help or a hindrance to the Republican Party? Congressman McGowan?
So the first thing I'll say, and I always encourage people to do the same, is that I'm not obsessed with Donald Trump, okay? There's people who just want to talk about the president all day and all night, and every issue it's like, well, do you agree with Trump or you disagree? And what I tell people is very simple. It depends on the issue. And the bottom line is that I treat President Trump the same way I used to treat President Obama, and I served the last 2 years of his term. When I agree with them, I'm going to work with them. I'm going to try to make sure that if it's good for my community, that I make it happen. And if I disagree, I'm going to be honest and willing to speak out and be public about it. And honestly, I think that's what a good member of Congress is. Someone who always stands up for his or her community, no matter who's in the White House, no matter what the issue is.
Would you like to see him renominated for the Republican Party and be president for 4 years after this term?
We'd have to see, right? We're not even at the middle of his first term. Let's see what gets done. Obviously, in my view, and I'm biased, being a tax writer, the tax reform legislation was very good, is having a positive impact on the economy, is pushing the economic recovery deeper into our society, something that had been lacking in our country for many years. So some good things have gotten done. I have major disagreements on immigration rhetoric, on some of the trade policies that have been issued.
You don't like the tariffs?
No, I think it's good to focus on the Chinese and the way they cheat and undermine the international trade system, but I don't think it's good to punish our allies like Canada, Mexico, the European Union, the Australians, the Argentinians, the Chileans, so many who are very concerned about this tariff policy. I don't think it's a good idea to disengage from the world the way we did on the Paris climate agreement. So, John, all of this to tell you that on every issue, I'm going to call it like I see it. And I was a high school basketball referee. I learned to call it honest every time, and I do that with the President of the United States. I'm sure sometimes he doesn't appreciate it.
Sometimes it's a block, sometimes it's a charge.
That's right. That's right.
I'd say help. You know, I think if I asked anybody out here who wants their representative, whatever level of government that is, to be their primary focus, that they get elected the next time around. I don't know who could disagree in saying that the president's primary focus is not necessarily that he gets another 4 years. I hope he gets another 4 years personally, and we're all allowed to differ on that, but that's not his number one focus, and that's something that everybody should appreciate. I always tell folks, I think the only way to be a member of Congress is to do the way that it's done in combat. When you're in combat, you don't ever think about personal gain. You don't ever think about personal sacrifice. That's not what goes through your head. You're not thinking about how you become more wealthy, how you become famous, how you become anything else. That has to be the way that you represent this country, not worried about the next election cycle or if you get to come back, because we don't own these seats. The seats are owned by the people that go out there and vote for each person. We simply sit in them for a little while we're getting that opportunity.
I think that we need to be a party of ideas, channeling the inner Paul Ryan. And there's going to be a point in time where Donald Trump is no longer the president. We need to make sure that members of Congress, governors, mayors are churning out ideas, even if they're at odds with what President Trump may be promulgating. To Carlos's point, on clean energy, on trade, on immigration, if you disagree with the president, you should speak out. Because when he is no longer president, you're going to have another presidential primary. And I would like to see some of the ideas that Carlos just laid out there, which I share. I'd like those to be part of the next president, or I'd like to see President Trump come around on some of those issues. I don't view our party as static, and if you look at the Democratic Party right now, and I'm sure there's a lot of Democrats here, they are struggling right now with who is their leader now that President Obama is no longer in office. And that's, to me, a very underreported story in terms of how far left some Democrats want to take the party. As with any party, when you have the president of your party in the White House, the party is defined by that individual. I think it's actually important to have every elected official with that party label make sure that if they disagree or they want to see the party evolve on something, that they're out there forcefully doing that. And I mean, Brian and Carlos do an excellent job of that.
Is it obvious to all three of you that Kevin McCarthy will be the next Speaker of the House, succeeding Paul Ryan?
It is to me.
He's in the strongest position without question.
I don't take anything for granted. I guess we'll see what happens right after the new year, but he's a good man, good friend.
Congressman Curbelo, let me ask you this. What can the Republican Party do? Or what are the prospects for the Republican Party to broaden its base of support beyond the base that exists now, given rhetoric on trade, on NAFTA, on the border wall, on immigration?
Two population groups that I tend to focus on, probably because of where I'm from and who I am, is the Hispanic community and younger voters, millennials. So when it comes to the Hispanic community, I think that there are a lot of Hispanics in the country who like the Republican Party's agenda of economic opportunity and prosperity. That's why people come to this country, to seek out those opportunities. I think there are a lot of our policies on just values and traditions that a lot of Hispanic Americans in our country are attracted to. The problem is that immigration is the gateway issue for most Hispanic families. If you want to reach them, you have to be welcoming of immigrants, and you have to make sure that they know that you understand how important immigrants are to our country. They're really the lifeblood of our country, right? In order to stay young and vibrant and dynamic, we need immigration. And the way the economy is growing, we really need immigration because we need people to fill jobs, and we need people to buy products. So
We need people to pay taxes, to pay Social Security and Medicare
people
benefits.
to pay into Social Security and Medicare. So this is a critical issue, and that's why I tell you I work every week on the immigration issue in Congress, because not only do I think it would be good for a party, but I think it would really help heal our country. I think this immigration issue has been used by both sides to divide our country, to drive a wedge in our country, and the sooner we get it resolved in a way that makes sense, we can kind of turn that page in our history.
But considering that Paul Ryan agrees with you on that issue and nothing has happened, doesn't that mean that Republicans who share your views have gotten steamrolled by current political conditions, including the president?
It means that Republicans who hold my view have to get more aggressive and louder about getting this done. And again, you're seeing this play out in the U.S. House of Representatives right now. We have a resolution that we've introduced which would essentially open the door to a free and fair debate on immigration, like the one Mitch McConnell, to his credit, presided over in the Senate. We are asking for the same process in the House. Whatever your position is, if you're a hardliner, if you're for amnesty, whatever that's defined as these days, put forward your proposal, let's have a debate, and may the best one win.
Congressman Mast, I want to direct this one to you. How big is this so-called blue wave this year? And do you now think it is likely that Nancy Pelosi will be the speaker in 2019?
Not at all. I don't think it's likely at all. I think you look at what's being done for the American people, and we can look at any American in the eye and say the American worker is not being forgotten. When we have a discussion about trade, and we don't all agree on this, one thing that should be agreed on is that we've been in a trade war for decades. Just now, we're finally starting to be a retaliatory nation. We're not going to say we're going to get hit and not go out there and hit back. That's an important thing to be as the United States
like
of
the tariffs
America.
then?
I think that, yes, I think they're okay. I think it's okay. Next couple decades to come. That's Brian Mast's take on it. When you look at every person as an individual going out there, taking home an additional $2,000 as the child tax credit, having that doubled. When you look at what goes on with, my district that I represent, 70% of my district takes the standard deduction in terms of taxes. That being doubled, whether you're single, head of household, married, filing jointly. When you look at the businesses out there that are able to go out there and hire new people, I always give the example here in Florida of Waste Management. Waste Management went out there and gave bonuses to all of their hourly employees. Every single one of us has a garbage man. That's real dollars in the people that drive in front of our house each and every week. This is really helping the American worker. So no, I don't think there's going to be a blue wave. We're helping them out.
Why is the tax cut unpopular?
Say that one more
Why
time.
is the tax cut unpopular?
Well, I think to some degree it's been mischaracterized. When you look at Nancy Pelosi going out there and saying, oh, what you're getting, American worker, that's crumbs. That's what Nancy Pelosi is saying to somebody that's getting a $2,000 bonus from their company, or a company is paying this much further ahead into their pension
But if
program.
people are really feeling it in their real lives, would they know it?
People are really feeling it in my district. I can tell you that in a positive way.
Here's, I'm very proud of this legislation, and here's the issue. So if you just talk about the tax reform legislation, that's been hyper-politicized, and it's fallen into the storm that is our political system. Now, if you ask most Americans, or the swamp, if you ask most Americans, you say, how are you feeling about the economy? You're not going to get a politically charged answer. You're going to get an honest answer. And the bottom line is that most Americans are feeling better about the economy today. And when we go out to campaign in the fall, it's very important for people to realize that they shouldn't take that for granted. For a long time, and that's one of the reasons there's so much, I think, frustration and political violence in our country, and the way people have been expressing themselves and scapegoating. For a long time, the economic recovery only reached about half the households in our country. The other half were stuck in a stagnant economic situation. Today, we're seeing real wage growth. We're seeing not just these one-time bonuses, but obviously people's take-home pay has gone up because of lower withholding. We're seeing American companies making announcements about bringing jobs and operations back to our country, investing in our country. I visited a McDonald's the other day. They're putting $150 million into education opportunities for their employees. So this is making a difference. And sure, if you just ask, well, do you like the tax bill, yes or no, that people's views are going to be colored by a lot of things they've heard.
Gallup
You ask
had
them
it,
about the
39
economy.
approved, 52 disapproved a couple days ago.
What, the tax bill?
I would take issue with that. I don't know that. Look, if you say, do you support the Trump tax plan, 95% of Democrats are going to say no, because the word Trump is before the tax plan.
I think this was a poll that didn't mention party.
I think it's more favorable than unfavorable. I really do. I mean, with all due respect to whatever poll you cite to, but picking up on some of the statistics that Carlos mentioned, I think it's favorable. I also think that it will play out over time. It being April 15th, a lot of folks are going to go see their accountants. They're going to say, you're getting this back this year. Next year, you're going to get more than that. If you look at small business owners, I get a lot of thank yous when I go to the supermarket or the drugstore. I get a lot of thank yous saying, thank you for voting yes on that.
What they're talking about, direction, that's not just based on taxes. Let's look at the real debate questions that were occurring in the last election cycle. I was being asked, how are you going to work with a potential President Clinton on a $15 to $25 per hour minimum wage? So every one of you out there that's a business owner that has small businesses in your area, that is a difference in direction. People are seeing higher wages, not because the government is mandating higher wages, having nothing to do with somebody's productivity. People are getting higher wages because the employers can afford to go out there and give higher wages. This is a difference in direction that's going on right here, and I think everybody should be thanking God that we're not headed in that other direction.
And they have to, because the labor participation rate and unemployment's lowering. Tighter labor market, you're going to have to compete for workers.
Let me ask you the final question, and it goes to you since you're retiring from Congress. One of the things that I imagine some people in this room might be thinking is the same thing that I think when I meet and talk to individual members of Congress, who are usually pretty impressive people, pretty smart.
Present company excluded.
No, I'm not excluding President Clinton. That's my point. I'm wondering why it is that Congress so often appears to be less than the sum of its parts.
Because I think it is very easy to take the word Congress, set it over here, and just blame things on Congress. Your point is very well taken. Be it a Republican or Democrat, I would say to everyone here, if you were to meet individual members of Congress, Brian Carlos, the most liberal Democrat in the United States Congress, you would come away saying, intelligent, hardworking, boy, if they wanted to go into the private sector, they could probably do a lot better financially. Thank God we have people like Carlos and Brian and Stephanie Murphy and others, I'll just name a Democrat, willing to put their family life not on hold, but really give more back to the country.
It's a tough job.
It is, particularly in this, Carlos used the term, politically toxic environment. I think that's why. I mean, a lot of voters develop a personal relationship with their member of Congress, and it's easy to just blame Congress, you know, that amorphous institutional body over there. I would say this, it's not good for our democracy, John. It's not good for our democracy. The credibility of the institution is so low.
I agree with you. I think members of Congress are deriding way too much. But I'm thinking of a substantive point as well as politically. Why is it that the sum of these 435 individuals is not able to get more done to the benefit of their constituents?
You have divisions within the Republican Party over the best path forward in immigration. You now have Democrats, most are saying, you know, we're going to vote no, let's get control of the House back. So you have a lot of parochial intra-party as well as R versus D stuff, particularly as you're heading into midterms. I'm sure Carlos and Brian.
Yeah, I'll just add briefly, we all have a role in healing our democracy. And in many ways, the Congress is a reflection of what's happening in our country. There are a lot of people insulting each other, scapegoating each other. Brian talked about this right at the beginning when he said even Thanksgiving has become a chore for some families. And that's wrong. That's wrong. We cannot and should not, as a society, be talking politics 24/7. It's very unhealthy. So what I always tell, especially younger groups, but I'll tell this more mixed audience here today, is that we all have a role in fixing this. And oftentimes it starts with how you treat your relative or your friend or someone you come across. And only then, I think, you'll start seeing our politics healing at the national level. Now, that doesn't mean we don't have our role. These two colleagues and we're always looking for people to work with. We don't care what letter they have after their name. If they are willing to help us achieve our goals, we gladly engage and work together. So, but there's a lot of work to do.
Sure. Yeah, if you want to know why I think Congress could appear to be less than the sum of their parts, it's because every single one of us can look at something and say, I don't like the way that that looks. You know, I don't like Brian's jacket or Carlos' jacket, or I don't like whoever's jacket, but it's very difficult to come up with what we can all agree on that we like. We can all agree that we don't like the look of something, but when you try to put it all together to what do you all agree that you actually like, that's incredibly difficult, and I think that's the challenge we try to work through each and every day, and it's not an easy one.
Would you join me in thanking these impressive members of Congress?
And how about a big thank you for John Harwood giving us some inside baseball of what's going on in Congress. John Harwood, everybody, yes. Let's have some love for John. Come on, CNBC needs you. A few things that I took away is, number one, I somehow visualized Carlos Curbelo being a referee for a basketball game, and this 6'5" center confronting him in a call. So I would suspect you're hard to intimidate, right? Right, Carlos? I'm sure. Okay. And aside from that, I'm sure you've heard, but William and Kate had a baby boy this morning. So if I get a collective awe from the audience, I know. Or we have no idea what the name is yet, but I'm sure it's not going to be Prince. All right. Make sure you come down to the eGov Summit. We start in 8 minutes sharp at 2 o'clock, and we'll have a series of roundtables down there, including people in technology from other companies, which is going to be very interesting to listen to. So you're invited all to come down to eGov. That starts in about 10 minutes, and we appreciate you being here today at our eGov luncheon. Thank you.